Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another podcast episode. The Maple Leaf is back here again. We are here to discuss yet another topic on the subject of immigration. We shared many thoughts on many different programs previously. We are glad that you liked it, and we are here yet again to discuss something very prevalent these days. As you all know, post COVID, there has been a lot of backlog in the Canadian immigration, and as a result of which, there has been an increase in the number of refusals that have been given as well. So we are here today to discuss refusals. Canada immigration visa applications that has been posted and how to deal with these refusals that we get. So that's what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss this with our guest. In fact, our co-host himself, Ronen Kurzfeld, who is a licensed immigration lawyer, the lawyer who heads the firm Kurzfeld Law, our firm, in fact. First of all, let's welcome him. Ronen, how are you?
Very good. Thank you, Umar. How are you doing?
I'm doing great as well. It was nice to meet you a couple of weeks ago, but good that you're back in action in Canada. Hope you're having a good time with the office as well. I heard that there's a lot of backlog being cleared, so many applications getting their acceptance and stuff.
Correct. Yeah, we're very busy, full force.
Brilliant. So, talking about refusals, Ronin, can you just guide us? What are the most common reasons for Canada visa refusals, and how can they be avoided? Can you give us a brief synopsis on that?
So typically, when somebody gets the dreaded letter, your application has been denied, it's typically, we always say, it's kind of a cookie cutter decision. Okay, so they get the actual decision. It says why they were refused. Maybe for lack of ties back home. Can be for lack of financial support, depending on their application. But we always say, first thing, do not panic. Okay, once you get that refusal, we actually, what we do, we get the notes, we get the officer's reasons, and sometimes, and many times, they're of course way more detailed than the letter, and they can actually zero in on what the actual reason is. So that letter, it doesn't mean that that's the real reason why you got refused. So for example, we get people calling us, the letter says that I have insufficient funds, and I showed so much money. When we get the reasons, it may be different. If it's the same and they have evidence, and of course we'll talk about it, we can go and challenge it in court.
Okay, so Ronan, if somebody gets refused, and is there a possibility for a person to reapply for Canada visa? What should they do differently the next time when they apply?
Yeah, so there's no limit to the number of times people can apply. Of course, there's some exceptions. If somebody was found to have been misrepresenting, they may have a 5-year ban. But let's leave that on the side. There's no limit to the number of times people apply. So what we typically do, we can divide it to two scenarios. One scenario, somebody has been refused within the last 60 days if it's an application outside of Canada, and typically it's 15 days if it's an inland application. And then those that are beyond those just prescribed time that I said. For those that are within those times, the strategy that we always recommend and employ, we file a notice with the court, then we get the reasons in about 30 days. Once we get the reasons, we sit with the client and we can analyze the decision, we can analyze the reasons, and we can analyze their application. If we think it warrants to continue with the court application, of course, that's what we. If we think, you know what, maybe you can do it differently, I don't want to say better, but we can do it differently, we can improve on some things, then we recommend that we refile. Of course, the decision that's been denied is already on the record, so there's no guarantee will be approved when we refile, but at least what it gives us, we build it for the court. So we tell the clients, you have to be ready to go the distance. If they approve our refiling, hallelujah, amazing. If not, then we challenge the decision that we had refused.
So a person can request for a reconsideration of a Canada visa refusal decision, is it?
So it's a reconsideration. This is an appeal. Anybody can ask for a reconsideration. Unfortunately, our experience shows that it's hit and miss with the reconsideration. Many times officers do not like to reconsider, even when things are very obvious. That's why the court is a very strong tool. Now, if somebody has been refused beyond the time that I told you, then we typically refile it after we order the notes. If same thing, if we get approved, amazing. If not, we challenge a decision that we had the refusal.
So, Ronan, can you tell us if there is any particular type of visa which is most likely to be refused than the others? If so, why does it get refused? What are the common reasons? In fact, like say, for example, there are issues with ties back home or financial possibility for that person to be in Canada. What are the common reasons? Can you discuss that as well?
So it really depends on the application. If you take the visitor visa application, we always say you have to focus on three things: the reason for the trip, the purpose of the trip, the funds, whether it's someone in Canada inviting or the applicant themselves. That's the financial aspect we just discussed. And then the last thing, which is the subjective one, is ties back home. If you ask me to probably, it's more of an educated guess. Most applications get refused on the third one because the purpose of the trip is pretty, I don't want to say easy, but pretty simple to show. The funds too, that's typically very objective. It's the reasons, right? And then we have to go into factors such as their employment, travel history, they've applied before, do they have family members, and so on and so on. But it can be for any reason, and many times, look, officers are human beings, they make mistakes, and also they use what we call an AI system in many cases called Chinook that the computer make mistakes too, right? And that's for visitor visa. For student visa, it really many times they refuse because of the purpose and the genuineness of the student. So depending on the program that they choose, again, they have to show the funds and the ties back home. But many times it's zero on the actual study plan. Are you what you're going to study? Is it going to help you if you ever return to your home country or not? Is it either are you advancing? Are you regressing? So they look at many factors.
So when talking about ties back home, I think it's a very important aspect to be discussed because see, a lot of people they find it hard to prove ties back home because we know that definitely when they pursue journey to Canada, to immigrate to Canada, whether it's for visitors or studies, there is a far number of people, vast majority of the number, not majority, maybe a very high number of people who intend to stay in Canada permanently. So ties back home is sometimes a little bit tough. How do you advise tackling that to avoid refusal?
So it's very tough to talk about in a general perspective. You have to look at the entire facts of the case, but just the major factors again, if there's any travel history, family, employment, properties. So we use a combination of factors. Some countries they look at the actual class. The reality is every case is different. Okay? The reason may be the same, but that's why we try to tailor the factors related to that specific case.
Okay, Ronan, can you tell me one more other thing that I want to discuss as well in this podcast? What is the role of a Canadian immigration lawyer or a consultant in terms of dealing with a refusal or an appeal? Because see, is there anything that can be done? I'm not sure if is there anything that can be done as an individual when you get refused, or is it a must to go to an immigration lawyer or a consultant to get that sorted? What is the course of action?
So it depends on the strategy that you want to take. If you want to just refile it, the individual can refile if they know what they're doing, or they can hire a consultant or a lawyer. However, to go to federal court, only lawyers are permitted to go to federal court. Paralegals, consultants, they cannot.
So when you go to a lawyer to get to go to a court submission, what are the kind of requirements to kind of pursue such an application?
So, as I said, depending, first we take the refusal letter, and the first thing we file a notice with the court. Once we file the notice with the court, in about 30 days, we'll get the reasons. That's where we sit with the client and we analyze what they submitted, the reasons, and then we can see, right? So, for example, we talked about the funds. So, if they showed $50,000 and the officer says insufficient funds, that's a very good ground to continue. But if they showed, and we had cases like that, oh, I can show 30,000 now, but they only showed 2,000, then we recommend to refile because you cannot produce new evidence. You have to go with whatever was submitted and whatever was before the officer at that time.
Ronan, you know that across the globe you have different countries and different immigrations, right? And most of the countries, the notion is that when you get refused, it's like a bad mark on your travel history. Is that the same thing for Canada? I mean, like people getting refused, should they panic about getting refused to Canada?
Well, whenever somebody, I cannot speak for other countries, but if you have a refusal to another country, it's definitely a factor that we have to deal with for Canada. So, first, there's an obligation to disclose. Many people don't disclose that. There's a question on the form: have you ever been refused or applied any other country? And they say no. And then they get the surprise of their life that immigration knows about. So, you have to be truthful. And it's always, 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 I cannot overemphasize this. Be very open with your lawyer consultant because they need to know that, because there are ways to address it. But when they don't know, or if you don't tell them, they will not be able to address it.
So people who get refused to Canada, I was just talking about that to you, Ron, and stressing on the fact that people who get refused to Canada. There's a lot of people these days. What would your advice be to them? Because they feel a lot demotivated because the moment they get refused, they think that they are totally inadmissible to apply to Canada and so on and so forth. What would your advice be to them?
No, that's, as I say, a no-brainer. First, do not panic. Okay, like it's not the end of the world. Yes, it's a major blow, but not the end of the world. Number two, contact the lawyer. As I said, if you use a proven strategy, there's definitely a very good chance to overturn. We've been overturning many decisions, and many times, look, the officers may be right, and you have to refile. Or, and as I said, the officers are humans too, and they make mistakes. That's why we have the court system. So it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the road. There's a court for a reason. Canada is a democratic country, law-abiding, so we have rules for a reason.
Last question, Ronan. Last question. Let me finish it off with this short podcast. How is the COVID-19 pandemic affecting Canada visa refusals? Are we developing from COVID in terms of immigration? How are the processing times?
No, processing time, they're backlogs, but they are definitely improving in some countries, especially the Delhi visa post. But the courts, they're overwhelmed with with applications, right? So I think anybody that is about to appeal a decision, the road can be long, can be short, can be long, depending on what happens along the way. But we always say 3 to 12 months is kind of a realistic estimate.
Brilliant, Ronan. Thank you very much for answering those questions on refusals, Canada visa refusals. Do you have any last thoughts you want to share before we conclude?
No, I think the last thought is we mentioned here twice, and yeah, when people get refused, they're upset, they're angry, they're sad, they panic. Do not panic. There are definitely ways to resolve those situations.
Thank you very much, Ronan. Absolutely nice talking to you. We'll catch up yet again on another episode of Maple Leaf. It has been absolutely nice talking to you and listening to you about refusals. We have many more other topics that we want to discuss with you. Let's catch up on another episode until we talk to you guys next time. Thank you. Thank you, Ronan, for joining us.
Okay,
Thank you.
Omar, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.